Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog, and today I'm going to be casting on the blue sock for my 1 sock, 2 sock, red sock, blue sock pattern. And I'm going to use the Longtail cast on. Usually when I do the Longtail cast on, I hold my working yarn and my yarn tail in the slingshot position. But there's another way to execute this cast on that may feel a little more natural to English style knitters. Even though it produces the exact same results, your yarn is managed differently. Let's get started. Just like for the traditional longtail cast on, we're going to start by leaving a yarn tail that's approximately 3 to 4 times the length of our cast on edge, and then make a slip knot. You can place that loop onto your knitting needle and then pull the working yarn to tighten things up. And that loop counts as our first cast on stitch. Next, tension the yarn, the working yarn, on your right hand just as if you would when you're knitting English style. And I generally do that just by weaving the yarn over, under the fingers on my right hand. But there are other ways to tension, and that is perfectly fine as well. Next, you want to hold on to that yarn tail with your left hand. So just wrap the fingers of your left hand around the tail. And as you're casting on, you don't need to let go. It helps maintain your tension if you keep a grip on this throughout the cast on. Now I'm going to take my right hand and wrap the yarn tail clockwise halfway around the thumb on my left hand. And what that does is creates a loop right around my thumb. Bring the knitting needle up through that loop, catching just the front strand. Wrap your working yarn around the knitting needle as if you're knitting. Pull the new stitch through. Drop the loop off your thumb, and then use your thumb to catch the yarn tail and pull it forward, tightening everything up. And that also sets you up so that you're ready to cast on your next stitch. Bring your needle up through the thumb loop. Wrap the working yarn around the needle as if to knit. Pull the new stitch through. Drop your thumb out of the loop. Use your thumb to pull that yarn tail and tighten things up. And again, you're set up to cast on the next stitch. Knitting needle up through the thumb loop. Wrap your yarn around the needle as if to knit. Pull the new stitch through. Release the thumb loop and use your thumb to pull the yarn tail forward. And you would continue casting on until you have enough stitches for your project. Whenever you're working in the round, no matter what type of cast on you use, it's easy to get a little gap or jog on the cast on edge in between the first stitch you cast on and the last stitch you cast on. I like to minimize that jog as I'm casting on so I don't have to tighten things up or stitch things together later. Usually I do that by casting on 1 extra stitch, which I already have, and then either passing the first stitch up over the last or the last stitch up over the first. In this case, I'm going to look at the cast on edge and notice here that where I would go to start knitting in the round, I would knit this direction across these stitches, that the edge, the yarn slants up and to the right along that edge, up and to the right. I'll mimic that slant by passing the first stitch up and to the right over the last stitch. To do that, I'm going to need to do a little bit of maneuvering. First, I need to slip this last stitch over to where the first stitch is. The good news is that things should open up pretty easily to slip that stitch. And I don't necessarily want to twist it as I go. So I'm going to loosen things up. And then I'm going to just slip it from this needle up over onto the other needle. And then tighten everything up again. And now I want to pass the first stitch up over that last stitch. And again, it can take a little bit of maneuvering to do this because you don't want to split your yarn and you don't want to drop stitches off your needle accidentally. So I've got the first cast on stitch and I'm passing it up and over my last cast on stitch. And you've got to be really careful here not to drop it off the last stitch off your needle. So I got it there. And I'm going to drop it off. And then I need to return this last stitch back to the other needle. And again, I want to do that without twisting it. So I'm slipping it purlwise and just moving it right back over to where it was. And then tightening everything up. And now this little jog or gap has been closed up so I don't have to deal with it later, and I can just begin knitting in the round now. I hope you enjoyed learning how to do the thumb version of the Longtail cast on. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel, The Chili Dog, for weekly tips and tutorials. Until we stitch again, happy knitting!